The moment Adelaide Sterling announced at her family's Sunday dinner table that she wanted to see the world beyond Boston's cobblestone streets. Her three older brothers erupted into laughter, so loud the chandelier crystals trembled overhead, and her mother's face turned the color of the cranberry sauce pooling on her finest china. It was October 1876, and proper young women of 22 did not speak of adventure, especially not Adelaide, who had been groomed since birth to marry well and maintain the Sterling family's reputation in Boston's high society. Adventure, her eldest brother Charles wheezed between fits of laughter. What would you know about adventure, Adelaide? You fainted at the sight of a mouse last winter. Adelaide's cheeks burned, but she lifted her chin. That was different. I was startled, not afraid. There is a vast distinction. Her mother set down her silver fork with deliberate precision. This is your father's fault, letting you read those dreadful dime novels about the frontier. Adelaide, respectable women do not gallivant across the country seeking excitement. We have standards to uphold. But Adelaide had made up her mind. The decision had crystallized over months of watching the same faces at the same parties, discussing the same trivial matters while the world beyond Massachusetts called to her like a siren song. She had inherited a small sum from her grandmother, enough to make her own choices for the first time in her life. 3 weeks later, despite her family's protests and threats to disown her, Adelaide boarded a train heading west with a single trunk, her grandmother's money sewn into the lining of her best traveling coat, and a heart full of determination that surprised even herself. The journey took nearly a week, changing trains in Chicago and then again in Omaha. Adelaide watched the landscape transform outside her window, the neat farmlands giving way to endless prairies that stretched toward horizons so wide they made her breath catch. She had never seen so much sky. The other passengers mostly left her alone. A young woman traveling without a chaperone was unusual enough to warrant curious glances, but not conversation. By the time the train pulled into Hill City, South Dakota, Adelaide's traveling dress was rumpled, her carefully pinned hair had come loose in several places, and she had never felt more alive. The town was smaller than she had imagined, a collection of wooden buildings lining a dusty main street with the Black Hills rising in the distance like ancient sentinels. It was May now, and wildflowers dotted the hillsides in splashes of yellow and purple. Adelaide stepped onto the platform with her trunk, suddenly aware that she had no actual plan beyond getting away from Boston. The air smelled different here, sharp with pine and possibility. A few people milled about the small station, and she felt their eyes on her Eastern clothes and citified manner. "Miss, you need help with that trunk." A young boy, no more than 12, appeared at her elbow. "Yes, thank you. Could you direct me to a respectable boarding house?" The boy hoisted one end of her trunk with surprising strength. "Mrs. Patterson runs a clean place on 2nd Street. She takes in lady boarders sometimes. You staying long?" "I am not certain yet," Adelaide admitted, and the honesty of it thrilled her. For the first time in her life, tomorrow was unwritten. Mrs. Patterson's boarding house was a tidy 2-story building with lace curtains and a small garden where early vegetables were already sprouting. The proprietress was a widow in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner that reminded Adelaide of her grandmother. "I have one room available," Mrs. Patterson said, showing Adelaide a small but clean space with a brass bed and a window overlooking the garden. $3 a week, includes breakfast and supper. No gentlemen callers, no drinking, and I expect my boarders at meals on time." Adelaide paid for 2 weeks in advance, unpacked her trunk, and then stood at the window wondering what came next. She had wanted adventure, had traveled 2,000 miles to find it, and now she was in a small boarding house in a frontier town with no idea what to do with herself. That evening at supper, she met the three other boarders. Two were schoolteachers, sisters named Mary and Elizabeth who taught at the local schoolhouse. The third was a young widow named Sarah who worked as a seamstress. They were curious but welcoming, and over pot roast and potatoes, Adelaide found herself explaining her journey west. "You just left?" Mary asked, her eyes wide. "Without a husband or family. My family thought I was mad," Adelaide said. "They likely still do." Sarah, who was perhaps a year or two older than Adelaide, smiled with something like understanding. "Sometimes being called mad is better than being suffocated by expectations. What do you plan to do here?" "I honestly do not know," Adelaide admitted. "I suppose I should find work of some kind. My funds will not last forever." Elizabeth leaned forward. "Can you read and write well?" "Do sums." "Of course. I had an excellent education. The land office has been looking for someone to help with their records. Mr. Thornton mentioned it at the general store last week. So many people filing claims with the hills opening up for settlement, he cannot keep up with the paperwork." The next morning, Adelaide put on her most businesslike dress, pinned her dark hair into a neat bun, and walked to the land office. The spring sunshine was warm on her shoulders, and she tried to project more confidence than she felt. The land office was a single room filled with filing cabinets, maps on the walls, and papers covering every available surface. A man stood with his back to the door, studying a large map of the Black Hills region. He was tall and lean, wearing dusty trousers, a simple shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and a worn leather vest. "Excuse me," Adelaide said. "I heard you might need assistance with records." The man turned, and Adelaide found herself looking into the clearest blue eyes she had ever seen. He was younger than she expected, perhaps 26 or 27, with sun-darkened skin and light brown hair that was slightly too long. There was something about his face that arrested her attention, an openness in his expression that was entirely different from the calculated politeness of Boston society men. "I do," he said, and his voice had the easy warmth of someone who smiled often. "Though I will be honest, most folks who ask about the job change their minds when they see the mess. I am Asher Kane, and I freely admit I am terrible at organization." Adelaide felt a smile tug at her lips despite her nervousness. "Adelaide Sterling. I am quite good at organization, actually. My father ran a shipping company and I often helped with his filing." Asher's eyebrows rose slightly. "Boston. Is it that obvious?" "Only when you talk," he said, but there was no mockery in it. "And when you say quite good instead of pretty good." He gestured at the chaos surrounding them. "Can you start today? I will pay 50 cents a day, 6 days a week. It is not glamorous work." Adelaide looked at the mountains of papers, the misfiled documents, the general disorder, and felt something click into place. "When do I begin?" Working in the land office was nothing like Adelaide had imagined adventure would be, and yet she found herself genuinely engaged for the first time in years. Asher, she learned, was not actually a government clerk. He was a cowboy and ranch hand who had taken the job temporarily when the previous clerk died suddenly. He knew the land intimately from years of driving cattle through it, which made him invaluable for helping settlers find suitable claims, but paperwork baffled him entirely. "I can track 100 head of cattle across 50 miles, he admitted on her first day, watching as she created a sensible filing system. "But these forms might as well be written in Chinese." "Why did you take the job if you hate it?" Adelaide asked, sorting claims by date. Asher leaned against the desk, and she noticed he had a way of moving that was economical and graceful, like he was always aware of his body in space. "Man who had it before, Sam Webster. He had a wife and 4 little ones. When he passed from pneumonia, there was nobody to help her with the bills, the house payments, all of it. I figured I could do this for a while, make sure the salary kept going to her until she got on her feet. Found her a buyer for their house, helped her move back east to her sister's place. Once that was settled, I meant to quit, but then things got busy with the gold rush bringing more settlers, and they said they needed someone until they could find a permanent clerk. He shrugged. Been 6 months now. Adelaide felt something warm unfurl in her chest. That was kind of you. Sam was a good man. Seemed like the right thing to do. Asher pushed away from the desk. I have to ride out to the Peterson claim this afternoon, help them mark their boundaries proper. Think you can manage things here? I believe I can sort papers without supervision, Adelaide said dryly. Asher grinned, and it transformed his whole face. I believe you can too, Miss Sterling. After he left, Adelaide worked steadily through the afternoon, creating order from chaos. The work was satisfying in a way she had not expected. Each properly filed claim represented someone's dream, a piece of land they would build a life on. She read their names and imagined their stories. When Asher returned near closing time, she had made visible progress. He stopped in the doorway, looking around with something like wonder. Miss Sterling, I can see the desk. I have not seen the actual desk surface in 3 months. It was buried under claim forms from February, Adelaide said, which are now filed chronologically by date received. I also found 17 letters that were never answered. Some of them are quite urgent. Asher ran a hand through his hair, looking embarrassed. I kept meaning to get to those. I can draft responses if you like. You can review and sign them. You would do that, Adelaide met his eyes. It is why you hired me, is it not? Something shifted in the air between them, a moment of connection that made Adelaide's pulse quicken. Asher smiled, slower this time, and she noticed the fine lines at the corners of his eyes from squinting into the sun. I hired you to file papers, he said. But if you want to save me from drowning in correspondence too, I will not complain. You are turning out to be considerably more than I bargained for, Miss Sterling. Is that a problem? Adelaide asked, and she was surprised by the hint of flirtation in her own voice. No, Asher said quietly. It is not a problem at all. The days developed a rhythm. Adelaide arrived at the land office each morning, bringing order to the administrative chaos while Asher dealt with the endless stream of settlers needing advice, surveys, and claim assistance. He was good with people, she noticed. Patient with their questions, honest about the challenges they would face, generous with his knowledge of the land. She learned he had grown up on a ranch in Wyoming, that his father had died when he was 16, and he had been working cattle ever since. He had come to the Black Hills 2 years ago, drawn by work on one of the big ranches outside Hill City. You miss it? Adelaide asked one afternoon during a rare quiet moment. Working on the ranch, Asher was studying a map, marking new claim boundaries. Some days. I miss being on a horse all day, miss sleeping under the stars. But this has its rewards too. He glanced up at her, and there was something in his expression that made her cheeks warm. Different kind of work, but still helping folks build something. Adelaide found herself watching him when she thought he would not notice. The way he tilted his head when he was thinking, how he absently tapped his pencil against the desk when he was puzzling through a problem. He treated her like an equal, asked her opinion on things, listened when she spoke. It was intoxicating after a lifetime of being decorative and demure. 3 weeks into her employment, a man came into the office angry about a boundary dispute with his neighbor. He was large and red-faced, and his voice rose as he demanded Asher change the survey to favor his claim. Mr. Peterson, I understand you are frustrated, Asher said calmly, but the survey is accurate. Your neighbor's claim was filed first and it was properly marked. That is nonsense. You are taking his side because he paid you off. Peterson slammed his fist on the desk, making Adelaide jump. Asher stood slowly, and though he did not raise his voice, something in his posture changed. I think you should leave now and come back when you can discuss this civilly. I will go to the territorial governor about this. You are corrupt, Kane. Everyone knows it. The door is behind you, Asher said, still quiet but with steel underneath. Peterson stormed out, still shouting threats. When the door slammed, Asher let out a long breath and Adelaide saw his hands were shaking slightly. Does that happen often? She asked. Often enough. People get territorial about land, especially when gold might be involved. He sat down heavily. Sorry you had to see that. You handled it well. You did not lose your temper. Learned early that losing your temper in a fight just means you have already lost. Asher looked at her and his expression was troubled. This job, this town, it is not like Boston. Things can get rough sometimes. If you wanted to find something else, somewhere safer, I would understand. Adelaide considered him carefully. Are you trying to get rid of me, Mr. Kane? What? No, He stopped, seeming genuinely flustered. I just do not want you to feel trapped in something unpleasant. I chose to come west, Adelaide said firmly. I chose this job. I am not a delicate flower that wilts at the first sign of difficulty. My brothers thought I would come running home within a month, but I have no intention of proving them right. Asher's expression softened. Your brothers sound like fools. They are, frequently, Adelaide agreed and was rewarded with his grin. That evening, walking back to the boarding house in the long spring twilight, Adelaide realized she was happy. Genuinely, deeply happy in a way she had never been in Boston. The work satisfied her, the town was beginning to feel familiar, and Asher Kane made her heart do complicated things she was not quite ready to examine too closely. Sarah noticed immediately when Adelaide came in for supper. You are glowing, she said bluntly as they set the table. Is it the work or the man you work with? Adelaide fumbled a fork. I do not know what you mean. The way you just blushed tells me everything I need to know. Sarah smiled. Asher Kane is a good man, Adelaide. If you are developing feelings, you could do much worse. I barely know him, Adelaide protested, but even as she said it, she knew it was not quite true. She knew the important things. His kindness, his integrity, the way he saw her as capable and intelligent rather than merely decorative. Sometimes the heart knows faster than the head, Sarah said wisely. Just be open to it. As May turned into June, the weather grew warmer and the town busier. More settlers arrived weekly, filing claims and staking their futures on this rugged land. Adelaide's filing system was fully implemented. Correspondence was up to date, and the land office ran more smoothly than it had in years. She and Asher fell into an easy partnership, and Adelaide found herself looking forward to each day in a way that had nothing to do with clerical work, and everything to do with the man who shared the office with her. They talked about everything: books they had read, places they had been, dreams they harbored. Asher had a quiet intelligence that surprised her, and a way of seeing the world that was refreshingly straightforward after the Byzantine social games of Boston. One Friday afternoon, Asher closed the ledger he had been working on and looked at her across the desk. Tomorrow is Saturday, he said. My powers of observation tell me you are correct, Adelaide replied, not looking up from the claim she was filing. I was thinking, since we do not work Saturdays, maybe you would like to see some of the country around here, properly I mean, on horseback. Adelaide's heart jumped. I have not ridden in years. I am likely terrible at it. I doubt that. You are good at everything else you try. Asher was looking at her with an expression she could not quite read. If you wanted adventure when you came west, I figure you should actually see some of the wild country, not just the inside of this office. The memory of her family laughing at her dreams flashed through Adelaide's mind, followed immediately by a surge of determination. Yes, she said, I would like that very much. Asher's smile was like sunrise. Good. I will borrow a gentle horse from the stable. We can leave early, take a lunch, make a day of it. That night, Adelaide barely slept. She borrowed a split-riding skirt from Sarah, who was close to her size, and plaited her hair into a practical braid. When she met Asher at the stable just after dawn, he had 2 horses saddled and ready, his own rangy buckskin gelding and a sweet-faced chestnut mare. This is Copper, he said, stroking the mare's neck. She is patient and steady, perfect for relearning. Adelaide approached the mare carefully, letting her smell her hand. Hello, Copper. Please be kind to me. Asher helped her mount, his hand steadying her waist, and even through the fabric of her clothes, Adelaide felt the warmth of his touch like a brand. Once she was seated, he adjusted her stirrups with quick, efficient movements. How does that feel? Strange but good, Adelaide admitted. I forgot how tall horses are. You will remember quickly. Asher swung onto his own horse with fluid ease. We will take it slow. Just follow me and let Copper do most of the thinking. They rode out of town as the sun was climbing over the hills, painting everything gold and pink. Asher led them onto a trail that wound up into the foothills, and Adelaide found her seat coming back to her, muscle memory from childhood riding lessons asserting itself. The landscape was breathtaking. Ponderosa pines towered overhead, their bark golden in the morning light. Meadows full of wildflowers spread between the trees, and granite outcroppings jutted from the hillsides like the bones of the earth showing through. Birds sang in the branches, and somewhere far off, Adelaide heard the musical sound of running water. What do you think? Asher asked, bringing his horse alongside hers on a wider section of trail. I think it is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen, Adelaide said honestly. Boston has parks, but they are all planned and managed. This is wild. That is what I love about it, Asher said. Land that is still itself, not carved up and tamed completely, though that is changing fast with all the settlers coming in. They rode for several hours, climbing higher into the hills. Asher pointed out landmarks, told her the names of plants and trees, showed her where a black bear had clawed bark from a pine. He was completely at ease in the wilderness, and Adelaide found herself trusting his guidance entirely. Around midday, they stopped in a high meadow beside a creek that tumbled over smooth stones. Asher unpacked the lunch he had brought: bread, cheese, apples, and cold chicken. They sat in the grass and ate while the horses grazed nearby. Thank you for this, Adelaide said. You were right. I came west for adventure, and I have spent most of my time filing papers. Important papers, Asher said. You are helping people build their lives here, that matters. But this matters too. Adelaide gestured at the meadow, the hills, the endless sky, being out in it, experiencing it. Asher was quiet for a moment, looking at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why did you really leave Boston? It was not just wanting adventure, was it? Adelaide considered deflecting, giving him the simplified version, but something about the moment, the honesty in his eyes, made her want to tell the truth. I was suffocating, she said quietly. My whole life was planned out. Marry a suitable man, have suitable children, attend suitable parties, and die having never done a single thing that mattered. My mother had 3 men picked out for me, all from good families, all spectacularly boring. They looked at me like I was a pretty ornament, something to display on their arm at dinners. She picked at the grass beside her. I wanted to be seen as a whole person. I wanted to matter for something other than my family name and my ability to pour tea correctly. "You matter," Asher said, and his voice was rough with something that might have been anger on her behalf. Anyone who could not see that was blind. Adelaide met his eyes, and the air between them seemed to thicken. "Sometimes I think you see me better than anyone ever has." "That is because I am looking," Asher said simply. "Really looking, not just at the surface." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered against her cheek, and Adelaide felt like she might burst into flame from such a simple touch. "Adelaide," he said, and her name in his voice was a caress. "I know you have not been here long, and I know I am just a cowboy with no prospects beyond this temporary job, but You are not just anything," Adelaide interrupted. "You are kind and intelligent and good. You see the world clearly, and you help people without expecting anything in return. That matters more than prospects." Asher's smile was slow and wondering. "I was going to say that I am falling in love with you. Have been since you walked into that office and started organizing my disaster like it was the most natural thing in the world." Adelaide's heart felt too large for her chest. "I am falling in love with you too," she whispered. "I did not expect it. I thought adventure meant traveling and seeing things, but the biggest adventure has been discovering how I feel when I am with you." Asher cupped her face in both hands, his touch gentle despite the calluses on his palms. "Can I kiss you?" "Yes," Adelaide breathed, and then his lips were on hers. The kiss started soft and tentative, a question being asked and answered. But then, Adelaide's hands found their way to his shoulders and Asher pulled her closer, and the kiss deepened into something that felt inevitable, like a river finding the sea. Adelaide had been kissed before, chased pecks from suitors in Boston parlors, but this was entirely different. This was fire and sweetness, and coming home to a place she had never been. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Asher rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that for weeks," he admitted. "Why did you wait?" "I was not sure you would want a cowboy." "You could have anyone." Adelaide laughed, the sound bright in the meadow air. "I do not want anyone. I want you." They stayed in the meadow for another hour, talking and kissing and planning a future that suddenly seemed full of possibilities. When they finally rode back to town in the late afternoon, Adelaide felt transformed, like the world had been repainted in brighter colors. Over the following weeks, Adelaide and Asher built their relationship in the spaces between work. He took her riding every Saturday, showing her more of the Black Hills country. She introduced him to the poetry she loved, reading aloud in the office during slow afternoons. They ate dinner together when they could, taking long walks after to extend their time together. Mrs. Patterson noticed, of course, and so did everyone else in town. Hill City was small enough that a romance was everyone's business, but Adelaide found she did not mind. Let them talk. She had spent her whole life worrying about what people thought, and it had brought her nothing but misery. Sarah was delighted. "I knew at the moment you came home glowing from that first ride," she said. "He is a good man, Adelaide. Hold on to him." "I intend to," Adelaide said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. But as summer deepened, storm clouds gathered in the form of a letter from Boston. Adelaide found it waiting at the boarding house one evening in late July, her mother's precise handwriting on the envelope like a judgment. She read it in her room, her hands trembling. The letter was everything she had feared. Her family had located her through the bank where she had withdrawn funds. Her mother demanded she return immediately, saying that her behavior was a disgrace to the family name. She had been gone long enough for the scandal to die down, but only if she came home now and married Mr. Robert Harrison, who was willing to overlook her temporary madness in exchange for her hand and the business connections her father could provide. Adelaide read the letter 3 times, feeling cold despite the summer heat. Her mother had included a train ticket, prepaid, leaving Hill City in 2 weeks. She did not tell Asher immediately. For 3 days she carried the letter like a weight, trying to decide what to do. Part of her, the part raised to be obedient and proper, whispered that she should go back, that this Western dream was temporary and she always knew it would end, that she could not really build a life here with a cowboy she had known for only a few months. But the larger part, the part that had grown strong under the Dakota sun, rebelled against the very idea. On the 4th day, Asher noticed something was wrong. "You have been quiet," he said as they closed the office for the day. "Distracted. Did I do something?" "No," Adelaide said quickly. "You have been perfect. It is just—" She pulled the letter from her pocket and handed it to him. Asher read it slowly, his expression growing harder with each line. When he finished, he looked at her with eyes that held both pain and resignation. "You are going back," he said, and it was not quite a question. "No," Adelaide said, surprised by the certainty in her own voice. "I am not. But your family, my family wants me to be something I am not. They want a doll to dress up and marry off. I am not that person anymore. I do not know if I ever really was." Adelaide took the letter back and deliberately tore it in half. "I am staying here with you if you still want me." Asher closed the distance between them in 2 strides and kissed her hard, pouring everything he felt into it. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright. "I will always want you," he said fiercely. "Always. But Adelaide, are you sure? They are your family. If you cut ties, then I will build a new family," Adelaide interrupted. "With you if you will have me." Asher pulled her close, tucking her head under his chin. "I will have you in any way you will let me, though I should warn you, I cannot give you the life you had in Boston. I have some savings, and I have been thinking about taking up a homestead claim myself, but it would be hard work building a ranch from nothing." Adelaide pulled back to look at him. "Are you asking me to marry you? I am making a mess of it, but yes." Asher took her hands. "I know we have not known each other long by conventional standards, but I am sure about you, about us. Adelaide Sterling, will you marry me? Will you build a life with me out here, even though it will be difficult and you will have to work harder than you ever did in Boston?" "Yes," Adelaide said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes to all of it. The work, the difficulty, the adventure of building something together. Yes." They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Hill City. Sarah stood as Adelaide's witness, and Asher's friend Jacob from the ranch stood as his. Adelaide wore a practical blue dress she had bought at the general store, and Asher wore his best shirt and vest. There were no elaborate flowers, no fancy decorations, just 2 people promising to love each other for the rest of their lives. When the pastor pronounced them married and Asher kissed her, Adelaide felt a joy so pure it brought tears to her eyes. This was what she had been searching for without knowing it. Not just adventure in the geographical sense, but the adventure of sharing life with someone who saw her truly. They spent their wedding night in the small room Asher rented above the general store, and Adelaide discovered new dimensions of love in his arms, the physical joining as sweet and right as everything else between them. In the morning, lying in the circle of his arms with the sun streaming through the window, Adelaide said, "I need to write to my family, tell them I am married." "Do you think they will ever forgive you?" Asher asked, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her shoulder. "I do not know. Perhaps in time, but even if they do not, I will not regret this choice. You are my family now." Asher kissed the top of her head. We will build something good together. I promise you that." True to his word, Asher filed for a homestead claim the following week, choosing land in a valley about 5 miles from town where a creek ran year-round and there was good grazing. Adelaide quit her job at the land office, which now had a permanent clerk arriving from Pierre, and threw herself into planning their new home. They lived in a tent on the claim while Asher built a small cabin, working every daylight hour to get walls and a roof up before winter. Adelaide helped however she could, learning to mix mortar and chink logs, her soft Boston hands developing calluses and strength. Jacob came to help several weekends, and other neighbors pitched in too, the frontier tradition of barn raisings extending to cabin buildings. By the end of September, they had a one-room cabin with a good stone fireplace, a loft for sleeping, and real glass windows that Asher had hauled from town as a surprise. "It is not fancy," he said as they moved their few possessions in. Adelaide looked around at the rough wooden walls, the simple furniture Asher had built with his own hands, the view of the hills through the windows, and felt her heart swell. "It is perfect," she said. "It is ours." The first winter was hard. Adelaide learned to cook on the fireplace, to manage with fewer dresses and simpler meals, to make soap and candles and all the things she had taken for granted in Boston. Some days she was so exhausted she could barely move, her muscles aching from unfamiliar labor. But she also learned the satisfaction of work well done, the pride of providing for themselves, the deep contentment of falling asleep in Asher's arms after a long day. They read together in the evenings by firelight, talked about their plans for expanding the ranch, dreamed about the future. In December, during a quiet snowfall, Adelaide realized her monthly bleeding had not come. She waited another month to be sure, then told Asher on a cold January evening. "I am with child," she said simply, watching his face. Asher's expression cycled through shock, joy, and fierce protectiveness in rapid succession. "Are you well? You need to see the doctor in town. Should you be resting more?" Adelaide laughed at his sudden anxiety. "I am well, strong. Women have babies every day, Asher. I will be fine." He pulled her close, his hand spreading protectively over her still flat belly. "We are going to be parents," he said wonderingly. "We are. Are you happy?" "Happy does not begin to cover it," Asher said, kissing her softly. "Terrified but happy." Their daughter was born in early September, delivered by Sarah, who had learned midwifery from her own mother. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Adelaide thought she might not survive it, but when she finally held her daughter, red-faced and screaming, none of it mattered. "She is perfect," Asher said, tears streaming down his face as he held his tiny daughter for the first time. "Look at her, Adelaide. We made this perfect little person." They named her Rose after Adelaide's grandmother, who had given her the money that made everything possible. Rose was a healthy baby with Asher's blue eyes and Adelaide's dark hair, and she filled their small cabin with noise and joy. Adelaide discovered motherhood was harder than anything she had done before, but also more rewarding. She learned to nurse Rose while churning butter, to carry her in a sling while working in the garden, to function on broken sleep, and still find moments of transcendent beauty in her daughter's smile. Asher was a devoted father, walking the floor with Rose when she was fussy, singing to her in his rough but gentle voice, rearranging his work so he could spend time with both his girls. Watching him with their daughter, Adelaide fell in love with him all over again. The ranch grew slowly. They acquired cattle, a few at a time, building their herd from Asher's careful purchases and natural increase. Asher built a barn, then a chicken coop, then a larger cabin with separate rooms when Adelaide told him she was pregnant again. Their son was born 2 years after Rose, an easier birth this time. They named him Daniel, and he had Asher's quiet temperament and Adelaide's curiosity about the world. Rose adored her little brother, helping to watch him with the seriousness of a 4-year-old given important responsibilities. Life settled into a rhythm of seasons and work, challenges and joys. Some years were good, with fat cattle and good prices. Some years were lean, with harsh winters or dry summers that tested their endurance. But they faced everything together, and Adelaide never once regretted her choice. She wrote to her family periodically, sending letters that went unanswered for years. But when Rose was 5, a letter arrived from her youngest brother, Thomas, who had always been her favorite. He had married against their parents' wishes and been partially disowned himself, and he wrote with understanding and reconciliation. Slowly, carefully, Adelaide rebuilt some connection with her family. They never fully understood her choices, but they came to accept them. When Thomas visited with his own family when Rose was 7, it was awkward at first but eventually warm. He stayed a week, and by the time he left, he told Adelaide he envied her life. "You found something real," he said as he prepared to board the train back east. "Something that matters. I am proud of you, Adelaide, even if I was too foolish to say so before." As the years passed, Adelaide and Asher's ranch prospered. They hired hands during busy seasons, expanded their herd, and built a reputation for quality cattle and honest dealing. Rose and Daniel grew into capable children who could ride and work alongside their parents. Asher added onto the house again, giving them a proper parlor and separate bedrooms for the children. When Adelaide was 35, she gave birth to a third child, another son they named Samuel. He was unexpected but deeply loved, arriving at a time when the ranch was finally successful enough that Adelaide could enjoy motherhood without quite so much physical hardship. One evening when Samuel was 2, Adelaide and Asher sat on the porch of their house watching the sun set over the hills. Rose and Daniel were playing with their little brother in the yard, their laughter bright in the cooling air. "Do you ever think about what your life would have been if you had stayed in Boston?" Asher asked, his arm around her shoulders. Adelaide leaned into him, breathing in the familiar scent of him, leather and pine and home. "Sometimes. I imagine I would have married that boring man and had boring children and lived a boring life. I would have been comfortable and respectable and utterly miserable. No regrets then." "Not a single one." Adelaide turned to look at him, this man she had built a life with, and saw the passage of years in the silver threading his hair, the deeper lines around his eyes. But his smile was the same, and the way he looked at her still made her heart race. "You gave me adventure, Asher. Every single day with you has been an adventure." Asher kissed her, soft and sweet. "You are the one who was brave enough to want it, to claim it for yourself when everyone told you it was impossible." "We found it together," Adelaide said, thinking back to that first day in the land office, how nervous she had been, how uncertain of her future. "That is what matters. We found it together." That night, lying in their bed with the window open to the cool autumn air, Adelaide thought about the girl she had been, the one who stood up at a dinner table in Boston and declared she wanted adventure. Her family had laughed, certain she would fail, equally certain that young women did not get to choose their own paths, but she had chosen anyway, and she had found more than adventure. She had found purpose, partnership, and a love that sustained her through everything. She had found a cowboy who said, "Let us find it together always," and had meant every word. As Adelaide drifted toward sleep, Asher's arm around her waist and the sounds of the ranch settling for the night outside their window, she smiled. The adventure was not over. It would continue tomorrow and the day after, in the work of their hands and the love of their family and the life they had built against all odds. She had wanted to matter, and she did. Not because of her family name or her ability to pour tea, but because she had chosen courage, chosen love, chosen to build something real in this wild country. And in doing so, she had found exactly what she had been searching for. Rose would grow up and marry a young doctor who set up practice in Hill City, staying close to the land she loved. Daniel would take over the ranch eventually, running it with the same integrity his father had taught him. Samuel would become a teacher, educating the children of the territory as it moved toward statehood. Adelaide would live to see South Dakota join the Union, to see automobiles appear on the streets of Hill City, to hold her grandchildren and tell them stories of the early days when the territory was young and wild. She would live to 73, surrounded by the family she and Asher had built, and when she passed peacefully in her sleep, Asher would follow her only 6 months later, as if he could not bear to be parted from her for long. But that was all in the distant future. On this night in 1889, Adelaide was 36, Asher was 40, and their life together still stretched before them full of promise. They had faced down skepticism and hardship, had built something lasting from nothing but determination and love, and they had done it together. The cowboy had promised her adventure, had promised they would find it together always, and he had kept that promise every single day. And Adelaide, who had been laughed at for wanting more than the narrow life prescribed for her, had proven that courage and love could build miracles in the most unexpected places. She fell asleep smiling, dreaming of tomorrow, of the work they would do together, of the life they would continue to build. Outside, the Black Hills stood eternal under the stars, witnesses to a love story that had started with a brave choice and grown into something beautiful and enduring. And in the morning, they would wake up together and begin again, finding new adventures in the ordinary magic of shared life, proving every day that the best stories are the ones we write for ourselves, against all expectations, guided by nothing but faith in each other and the courage to claim the lives we truly want. The end.